Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about leaving your body, which, believe it or not, we all have the capacity to do. And I also want to talk about the healthy antidote to leaving your body, which is to be grounded, empowered, and present in our physical form. Now, you may or may not have ever heard anybody use the term leaving their body or I left my body, but as a therapist and shamanic healer for most of my adult life, I've many times had clients report or describe just very casually that they left their body at different times, particularly in times of trauma and distress. And if we look deeply at almost any addiction or compulsion or mental or emotional distress, there is some aspect of not being present in almost all of them. In fact, that's what most addictions and compulsions do. They get us the hell out of here. Particularly drugs and alcohol change the way we feel almost immediately. I know as a former sex and love addict that sex and relationships certainly got me out of myself, as did my codependency, binging and purging on food, and certainly video, social media. Short-form content addiction can be a very seemingly benign way to not be present with ourself or our circumstance. Now, there's nothing wrong with seeking relief or distraction. We actually need rest on a regular basis. Mental rest, emotional rest, physical rest, energetic rest, the relational rest from the pull or engagement with others that solitude can offer us. But most of us don't learn healthy ways to get that respite. In fact, we live in a culture that is simultaneously obsessed with getting the right amount of sleep and obsessed with being compulsively, addictively productive. But sleep is only a particular kind of rest. Again, we need pause, an in-breath, and music between the notes. They call it a rest. We need silence. Just as day must be balanced by night, and again, the out-breath be balanced by the in-breath, it is healthy, needed, necessary to have breaks all the time from engagement, from being on, from being productive, from taking in information. Breaks from our own mental, emotional, relational merry-go-round that many of us are riding on. And so the question is, if I'm not present, where am I? And in my many years of working with clients, it is fascinating the variety of creative, innovative ways and places that people find to get that pause, to keep themselves safe, to find that rest that they need. But most of it's not conscious. And a lot of the ways that we do it are not particularly helpful in the long run. Now, we have free will here, and we actually get to live however we like. And my perspective is, you can do whatever you want, but it's much better if you're actually making a conscious choice rather than just doing something unconsciously. Because once we make things conscious, then we can decide as the directors of our own life, as our own healthy self-caregivers, is this pattern or behavior of how I give myself a break actually working for me? Or is there a better way? A more productive, constructive, healthier way to care for myself than subtly or dramatically leaving my body. And again, leaving the body is an ability that we all have, and we all do it in one way or another. Consciously choosing how and when we leave and where we go on those excursions makes a big difference for the health of our psyche and the agency and personal power that we feel in our life. And the real potency of the spiritual psychology work perspective is in working directly with the non-physical, the non-rational aspects of ourself. And again, we all have this capacity as well to turn our observing, curious mind inward and examine our own experience. What's actually happening? And our bodies are an incredible doorway both into our inner demons and to the transpersonal realms that have only our highest good in mind. That's why meditation and prayer are central to almost all spiritual practices. Our body is the temple. And when we enter that temple, we discover that the goddess is waiting for us with joy, wisdom, and unconditional love. But a lot of times the doors to the temple seem to be locked. And that's our personal growth work, to unlock the doors to the inner sacred sanctum where the God within resides. And there's a lot of different reasons that those doors might be locked and well guarded. Many of us have been abused, neglected, harmed by the ignorance, selfishness, unresolved emotional issues of other people. We may be very sensitive and have been overwhelmed by the emotional, mental, and energetic interference blasting at us from the world. We may have been threatened or harmed by institutions, cultural, religious, systemic negativity that has not supported or nourished us on a soul level. And so most of us retreat, often at a very young age. In fact, it seems to be the hero's journey for most of humanity to be separated for one reason or another from our authentic self, and then our work is to reclaim it, to be able to be who we are meant to be here for the fulfillment of ourself and the benefit of the larger system. The metaphor of the hero's journey really describes this inner experience where there's some monstrous being like a dragon that is ravaging the village, stealing riches, bringing them back into their cave. And the hero has to go into that cave and face the demon to reclaim that treasure and return it out into the community for the benefit of others and themselves. And metaphorically, that treasure is our soul self, our authentic uniqueness. We are each a jewel in the rough, and we are each of the characters in that hero's journey. The demon is our own defensive structures, our unresolved emotional issue, our fears, our selfishness, our rage, our unworthiness. And the dragon's cave is our own inner self. And like good heroes, we don't need to do this alone. In fact, most of us can't. Epic heroes always have help, usually divine help, or certainly the help of companions. Courage to enter the depths and face the demon and reclaim the treasure is profoundly transformative and turns us into the hero or heroine of our own life. And we become enriched by that quest, and our village or community is enriched when we return with these riches of our own self to them as well. I know I've shared that metaphor in other podcasts, but it is so central to the human experience, it cannot be shared enough. And so when we leave our body in small increments or in major portions, as happens with extreme trauma, that is how those jewels get put into the cave. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples because it's fascinating and some of you might identify, or at least begin to identify where you go when you distract, dissociate, or find yourself not present. Unpresent. I don't know if that's a word. I think I just made it up. Being unpresent. So I've been working with a client recently who has a couple of little kids, and he's cut back a lot on his drinking and pot smoking, although he's not completely sober. He's experimenting whether he can be a social drinker or not. It's a questionable experiment, but this is not a podcast on addiction. So suffice to say, he is really doing tremendous self-growth work and being present with himself and desiring to be more present in his life. He wants to have a good relationship with his kids, which he did not have with his own parents. And it's one of the great benefits of life is that over and over again, it gives us opportunities to do things differently. And children are one of the great catalysts for that. It's probably not coincidental that his children are about the age that he was at when his parents got divorced, which was a tremendous emotional rift for him. And if we live long enough to be grandparents, we even get a third chance at a redo. Because the universe really does want us to grow, evolve, and find fulfillment and connection. So we get all these opportunities. And so he was talking about wanting to be more present. And so we did a little body relaxation, and I suggested, well, let's explore where you go when you're not here. And as soon as he brought his awareness inward, he pointed to his head. I live in my head. And I asked, in the front of your head? In the back of your head? And he said, kind of in the front. And how do you get there? Mostly through my phone and television. And I think this is very common, particularly now in the information age, for people to live in their head, although there are many other places to go, and I'll give some other examples. And so we brought some awareness to the part of himself that is up in his head. Who's in there? And we discovered this lovely little child who was curious and playful, but very sensitive. And I asked if they'd be willing to come out. And they were excited to come out. And my client kind of experienced them slipping out of their head, down the side of their face and neck, and kind of cuddling on their chest, their head on their shoulder. They were kind of shocked by this experience. And I asked what their relationship was with this part of themselves. And they said they hadn't really had one. But this beautiful little child part of themselves was not wounded, was innocent, actually kind of happy and playful. And I asked when they first went into that place if there was a body memory. And they were on the porch, and their father was saying goodbye the day that he moved out. And it was too much for them, this sensitive, beautiful part of themselves. And so he found a place to hide where he wouldn't be harmed, a secret place up in his head. And it reminds me of the story of Rapunzel, who gets put away in the tower for safekeeping, to not be harmed by the world. And again, we all have the capacity to do that. And we kind of played with this dynamic. Could the child go back up into their head? And he could. And could he come out consciously and at will? And he could do that as well. And we discussed that my client was now his own healthy self-caregiver. And it was safe for this child to come out now. That he could always go back in if he wanted to. And interestingly, the child didn't want to go back in. He wanted to be out, experiencing the world. And the fascinating thing about working with self parts in this way, working with our own transpersonal experience, is that there is no time, or it's certainly experienced in a different way. And this part of himself actually didn't know that time had passed. And when my client showed this beautiful child part of himself, his life today, his partner, his children, his dogs, where he lives, things he likes to do, places he likes to go, the child was so excited and had been separate from those things, didn't realize time had passed. And my client reported that later that night, instead of having a desire to smoke weed before bed, he gave himself a hot shower, did some stretches, and ate some of his favorite yogurt. And it was a flavor of yogurt he had loved as a child. And he reported sleeping better than he had in recent memory. Now, many people have the ability to leave their body completely, voluntarily or involuntarily. And this is frequently a trauma survival mechanism. And many people who've been abused or violated have the capacity to go up and out or back behind themselves. And some even have the ability to observe from that place that's often experienced as like floating up in the corner or being back behind themselves, observing, literally leaving their body. And from my perspective, this is a brilliant survival skill so that the authentic self is not harmed. The problem is we're unconscious about this and often don't welcome these authentic self parts back once the trauma has ended. And they even become averse to being in the body at all, either because they're afraid it's going to happen again. And if there has been serial abuse, then it actually has happened again. And this is the importance of grounding in present time, acknowledging what's real today. We can create safe, supportive, nourishing environments for ourselves and acknowledging that the trauma or horrors or tragedies of the past are in the past. And for those who leave their body in this way, there really is a depletion of life force. Every aspect of ourself holds life energy. And when we leave our body as a trauma response and often stay disconnected, we've lost access to a percentage of our own life force. And this is one of the ways to understand many of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, the intrusive dreams, panic, chronic anxiety or depression, is that there is an unwholeness trying to make itself whole. There's an aspect of ourself that is desperately trying to reconnect with our system. It's like locking a child outside the house for the night over and over. And once we become aware that we have done that, we can open the door and welcome them home. The way I approach healing trauma, we do not need to re-experience the traumatic experience. That already happened. We lived through it once. There is no value in living through it again. In fact, one of the real tragedies is that aspects of our authentic self can be split off and frozen in historic or psychological time in the traumatic experience itself. And that's the work of soul retrieval, is to step into those places in psychological and historic time and rescue those self parts and bring them back into our body, back into present time. It's incredibly transformative and healing. And the final main way that I have observed people not being present, ways that they leave or places that they go, is to kind of sidestep into the astral plane. I know this was my own experience, where there were parts of myself in these shadow places. Some of them like kind of terrifying dungeons, but many of them more like hiding behind some energetic curtain, peeking out. And in my own experience, some of those aspects of myself were quite resistant to coming back. They were like, fuck this. It is not a safe place here. People are assholes. We're kind of like emo teenagers. And those defensive structures of defiance or pseudo-compliance, of rejecting the world or withdrawing from it, although those made sense at the moment, in historic time where those dynamics developed, for me, I had a kind of crazy, radical period of time in early adolescence where I became a daily drug user, a petty criminal, and got into an emotionally abusive relationship all at the same time, and had very absent parents, and decided I wanted to be emotionally invulnerable and just shoved as much as I could of my emotional self out of my awareness because I didn't have any schooling or skills in emotional maturity and development until much later. It cost me thousands of dollars in therapy and zillions of various 12-step meetings. But it's all good. And those disassociated parts of myself were certainly wounded, and what I would also call lower self parts. They drove my addictions, my compulsions, and actually got a lot of juice out of being enraged, judgmental, victimized. They were resistant to healing and evolution. But over time, they've come around. And so the safest, most empowered place to be is as fully present and embodied as possible. To have all the circuits wired up, all the cylinders firing. And we may have to feel more things, but we're supposed to feel things because it's information. And so if I leave my body so that I can tolerate something that's intolerable, it might allow me to tolerate the intolerable. But if something's intolerable, why would I tolerate it? So becoming more embodied will change your life because it will change you. And our lives are a product of ourselves. And as I have become more present, more conscious, more embodied, my life has improved dramatically and continues to do so. Now that has incorporated often needing to make radical change in my work, in my relationships, in how I spend my time, to do yoga and yogurt rather than weed and vodka as self-soothing mechanisms. But if my body is my temple or my home, do I want to leave it unattended with the doors unlocked? Because no joke, there are energies that will come in, energetic squatters, thieves, ne'er-do-wells, if I'm not living consciously, presently, carefully, full of care for my body, my mind, my emotions, and my own spirit. So I encourage you to consider where you go when you distract. You don't have to change anything. Just notice and perhaps consider some healthier, more nourishing ways to give yourself the pause, the rest, the respite that you need. Meditation, exercise, time in nature, just quiet time, so that you can cultivate new habits, practices that are supportive and nourishing for the unique and beautiful jewel of your own authentic self. Thank you so much for listening. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.